Hi, my name is Marisol Zuniga. I am a organizational communication major at Cal State LA.
Hi, I'm Raymond. I'm also an organizational communications major at Cal State LA as well.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'm also a communications major, but specifically mass communications. So we decided to do the film Freedom Riders as our artifact. We chose this topic because the students are not only like, is it a narrative, but the students are also writing narratives about their lives in the movie. And it also talks a lot about how they view the world around them.
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief detail about the movie. So like good background about the movie is like they're teaching people like what their place is in this world, as well as showing them like how you can get out of poor education, that doesn't have to define you, as well as you're teaching students that they can unite no matter what their backgrounds or their differences are.
The movie takes perspectives from different high school students, and they all come from different backgrounds and different stories. There's pieces in their stories that connect them together, and then they kind of take those pieces and elevate their lives dramatically to a higher learning. So it's a pretty cool movie.
So we did decide on to do the narrative theory. So I'm just going to give you the definition of a narrative. So it's assumption that narrative is a basic human strategy for coming to terms with fundamental elements of our experience, such as time, process, and change. And it proceeds from this assumption to study the distinctive nature of narratives and its various structures, elements, uses, and effects.
So the characters, well, there's multiple, but one of the main ones is obviously the professor, and then all of the students. Eva is one of the main characters. Should we kind of just talk about like,
so kind of like her main character. So everyone has like Amanda was saying, everyone has like a personal journal that they're writing in, and everyone has a different life of them growing up. So for Eva, it was more like she grew up, everyone knows the movie's based in Long Beach. And so she grew up in a certain neighborhood that was involved with a bunch of gangs. So she felt like she was already affiliated with it, so she couldn't get out of it. She like her goal was to be able to graduate high school, make sure that she could live another day.
Yeah, and a lot of most people in the class, most students in the class all had similar lifestyles involved in like gangs and stuff like that. And they all had like their own personal problems going on in the story as well.
Eva is like student. There's more. There's Jamal. There's Cindy. There's Victoria, and they're all pretty much the protagonists of the story. There are antagonists in the movie as well. The ones that I pointed out were the gangs, the administrators, and kind of like the environment is actually antagonists as well, if you kind of see it from that perspective. But the environment also is the setting, which is like an urban, poverty-stricken environment in the high school, of course. And then another thing that I noticed was the theme. The theme of the movie is pretty much perseverance, because they're all really battling a lot, even though their stories kind of intertwined, but they're battling a lot. Also, another theme I noticed was rebirth, empowerment, self-worth, and the importance of education as well.
And how importance the education can change your perspective on the students around you.
Yeah, as well as like racism plays a huge part in it. So I know like they saw the beginning of the movie, like they saw the professor, they're just like, you know what, they never shut the class. Like little by little as the movie progressed, like they stopped showing up and they only ended up with like two people in the movie, or two people in the classroom, I'm sorry. And then little by little, like she tried a different way of teaching, and it shows that not all students learn the same. Like when you're at that age, like I'm sure you guys know, like when you guys were really into something, you guys wanted to be involved and included. And sometimes if there was a class that you didn't care for, you didn't understand what you're learning, it's not interesting to you, so you don't matter. Like, was the film like relatable? Like how was your guys' like high school experience? Like where did you guys grow up? Did you guys like were relatable to any of it?
Um,
Go ahead, Amanda.
uh, not necessarily. Like I couldn't relate in like the gang aspect. That wasn't really common in where I went to school. But obviously, what I kind of got out of it was every single person like in that classroom had a different story. Whether one's problem was like considered worse than the other, they all had different problems going on in their life, and anyone can relate to that because literally everyone has problems going on in their life. But that's kind of like what I took from it,
When you
what I
mentioned,
could relate to.
as soon as you said that, I thought of the scene where I believe it was Marcus, when he was saying that the teacher is just pretty much babysitting. Like, what are you doing here? You're babysitting. And it's sad
Yeah.
he gets that from all his other years being in school. You know, he had just met the teacher that same day. And for him to say
Yeah.
that, it shows everything he's been through and all the other students as well. Growing up, I kind of couldn't agree with what you're saying, but it really just depends on the school district, because I was in two different school districts and the teachers are miles apart, you know. At LA,
Yeah.
you get like a salt and pepper mix of some good teachers, but when I went to a school district in West Covina, it was like they were just miles differently. You know, they really encouraged being smart and learning, where in LA, it kind of was almost like a babysitting environment. And, you know, it's sad, but, you know, the movie
Yeah.
touched on a lot of real elements in real life.
It definitely varies because even like the school, like where I used to live, like our rival school was like a lot different when it came to like the way students behaved. And even though we were in the same city, it was like almost like two different sides of the city and whatever like went on in those schools.
Yeah. So for me, I can't relate. Like I was very sheltered growing up. Like I went to a private school. So it's kind of like I don't really know that aspect of it, where it's kind of like for us, like we go to mass, we do this, we do that. Like I didn't see the outside. I wasn't allowed to go to parties. Like I was just very like, oh, I didn't even know that exists. But now like when I come to when I grew up and I came to the real world and I saw things was like that, like you're like, this is reality. Like you were living in a la la land. You know what I mean? And it was like professors kind of like they prep you. That's what they pay the money for, is to prep you to go to college, to be able to continue. But my experience was a lot different than theirs in the movie.
Yeah.
How do you guys think that them expressing themselves in the journal like helped them? Because I know sometimes like talking to people like right now we're having a conversation, like talking to one another about like what goes on in our life is difficult. So it's kind of like, do you think that like kind of gave them like a clear board for them to talk? Because I know like she would open the cabinet the first time, it was like one journal in there. And that's why we talked about Eva first, because hers was the first one she read. But then like little by little, like people felt more comfortable, and then she would open it up and there were several journals.
I wrote a little bit about this like in a different part of the outline, but I can just talk about it now. I was saying how like journalism, like journaling and stuff like that, I know a lot of people do it for like their own like mental sake, just to like write everything down and get everything out. I know that when I journal, it's only when I'm like going through it, and it definitely helps me feel like I spoke all of it and like got out all of it out of me. So I know that probably helped them, because it seems like most of them in the movie didn't have like a lot of support system and no one to like go to and talk to, and they also didn't trust anyone and didn't want to talk to anyone about whatever they were going through anyway. So I think even though her point, the teacher's point was to kind of get them to read and write, I think it also helped them get all of their like feelings and emotions out on paper, so they weren't like holding in all this anger.
Right. And also at that age, like life is moving really fast, you know. So when you actually write down what you're doing, you kind of can see what you're doing, because there's a lot of times you're just doing it. You don't know the meaning of what you're doing, or you don't know if it's hurting anyone. So to have them write it down actually open up their eyes to what they were doing, you know. And Eva was like, I can't keep living like this. And that's what writing a journal helped. Also, David Epson and Michael White, they said everyone has their own story. It's important to tell your story, even if it's to yourself. So that when I read that, I was like, that's exactly what she's making them do. She's making them tell their story. And even though she's giving them the option for her to read it, she wants them to read what they're writing so they'll know exactly what they're doing, so they can get a different perspective, even though it's their own. It's them almost like re-watching their own story, you know, so they can adjust to how they want to live their life. So that was a pretty good perspective when she brought that up.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like when you watch a movie for the second time, there's a lot of things you missed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like with them, like writing their story, seeing what their life is like saying something out loud makes it real.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like your thoughts being out loud makes it real. So it's kind of like when they're talking about it and they're talking about their lives, it's just kind of like, they're like, is that really my life? Exactly. And for people that want to change their life, like that's something huge. Like for them to be able to talk about it out loud, it's kind of like they want help. They want to be able to change. Because if they didn't, then they wouldn't even be putting themselves out there like that.
That's what one of the, I forget which character, but he like went back to, he like, after all this happened, he ended up like going back to his mom. Who was that? The character who did that? I forget his name, but he went back to his mom after he had this like big realization.
Because he was in gangs and his mom said he can't live under my roof unless you're in gangs. Like I missed it.
Yeah.
I was sleeping in the alley. I think it was
Marcus. Yeah.
So it's so crazy, like just saying that, like, and then we're talking about like them like knowing that they can do better. Like a lot of them didn't even expect to make it that far or to even graduate high school, but then like them like empowering each other where it's kind of like, hey, like we have your back. Like at first they hated each other. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's like the years go by, they want to stay in the same class with each other, like they know each other, like they do what's right because they know like right from wrong because they're being taught that. But growing up, it's kind of like it's survival of the fittest. You're trying to do the best you can to survive in a neighborhood like that. So it's kind of like you don't know what, you know the consequences, but that's all you've known. So to you, that's okay.
Exactly.
And that goes into character development. When they first opened up, none of the students were talking at all. And then I believe it was their first day of second semester. One of the kids walked up to the middle of the class and went to read his journal to everybody. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot for just to do that in a year with some kids you barely just know for a year. It's a lot for him to do that. And that just shows a lot of growth that they went through just for that 1 year that they were in that class.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about the protagonist? Because we all, I'm sure, as soon as we say protagonist, we're thinking of the principal, and then I don't even know what her position was, the administrator, where she like didn't want to provide the books. Like she was kind of like, you can't teach other kids. Like these kids aren't going to make it in the real world. It's like, what kind of teaching is that? Or what's teaching kids like to, what are they supposed to be if they can't get at least those resources?
Yeah, that lady pissed me off.
I really know about the resources too, so that's the real sad part. It's like they think nobody cares about them. It's like the resources are there, but you have to get through somebody that's against you to get to the resources. Like none of them can walk there and get the books that they need. They have to go through someone else, and that's the sad part. That actually happens like today. You know, I've seen it personally, and it sucks, but that's just the system that they're up against. I was going to say the conflict is students and society, but it's also students versus the system as well. You know, they're battling their neighborhood, they're battling the society, they're battling the administrators. Like, they're up against a lot, and that's what the teacher was actually finding out. Like, you know, you can't judge them. Really, it's not their fault. You know, they can only do what they know, and the administrators and the society aren't giving them the tools for them to uplift themselves, unfortunately.
They also like just don't even believe in them in the first place.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and that's why the professor was like, no professor, at least that I know of, would have loved their students that much, or would taken on 3 jobs to be able to take them on field trips, get them to educate themselves. You know what I mean? Like I've had professors like they'll stay a little bit over to like help me if I'm like I don't understand something, but to know someone that's going to go out of your way to care for you that much, it's showing those kids that not all people are bad in the world. Some people are truly there and genuinely want to help.
Yeah, because especially in the beginning, they were like saying stuff about how they don't trust the teacher. Why should we trust you? Like you're basically nothing to me.
Yeah, she was at an uphill climb from the beginning. I mean, Eva blatantly said she hated her. She just met her, and
Mhm.
then it was Andre. Andre was saying that he's not going to give her any respect because, you know, him growing up, it always seems like he has to give respect to give it, and he's tired of that, so he wants to change it. But it was just an uphill battle for her, and I'm glad she kind of pushed through that. That was dope.
Yeah, just seeing someone, especially when you have so much negative coming towards you and you being like resilient and being able to come up on top, where it's like it's very admirable.
Yeah, because a lot of people in that situation, honestly, that's tough. Because I mean, what is she personally gaining from that? You know, all that is internal. Everything she's gaining is internal. You know, just to help these kids out. So that's dope, man.
But like she gained a lot. Like I know how you guys talked about like the Toast for Change, like how that symbolized like literally their growth.
And they had to reflect on what they were toasting to too. So it wasn't just, oh, let's toast. It was no, you have to do something and then let's toast to it. So, you know, that was like a reflection phase, I would say, in that scene. I really enjoyed that scene. And that wasn't even the end of the movie. So that tells you what the movie was.
Yeah. And that was towards the end, right? Or like the end of that was the first day of their sophomore year, right?
Yeah, sophomore year.
Yeah. And that was like before, like you guys were saying, when they first walked into class, they wouldn't even like sit next to each other. And now they're all in one big group talking about their emotions and feelings and stuff like that, which is great. Progress.
Like when one of the kids, he literally like walked up and like no one even knew that he was in class. Like he's been with us since freshman year. You know what I mean? Like literally his speech like made me cry. Every time I watch it, it makes me cry. Because I'm just like, he literally like, it's kind of like with school, like you go home and it's like you go to school for 8 hours or however long you go to school. It's kind of like your worries at home are gone. Everyone has personal problems. Like you're at school and it's like you get excited because you're going to be around friends that become family, especially in that classroom. That's what they became, with family. Like you spend most of your time with people. It's like you get to know who they are, why they're the way they are. And for him to like be able to put his heart on his sleeve and be able to talk to people and let them know what's going on in his life, like more power to him.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what are you guys' final thoughts on this movie? What do you guys like take away from it?
My takeaway on it is it goes back to what was I speaking on? I think it was the symbolism of it. You know, perseverance and uphill battles and things of that nature. The movie was very empowering, especially like having a kind of parallel ideas of the students that was there. Honestly, I used to think like them, and to get, you know, growth from that movie. I think I watched it when I was in high school. I think maybe not, but
it came out in 2006. So
yeah, you know, you got all those years to watch it, but I'm pretty sure I watched it in high school. I feel like I had like a project to do on it or something, but just the perseverance and growth from it, you know, and definitely the importance of education, you know, especially a movie like that. You probably would have to force a kid to watch that. Honestly, it doesn't have the likes of the movies that kids want to watch, you know, but it's a very important movie, and I'm glad.
Very impactful.
Yes, yeah, very. So yeah, I loved it. I would definitely recommend to anyone, student or not.
You and I both. I feel like it has so much to show, where it's kind of like it's reality. People are leaving this, especially like how I said myself, like I was very sheltered. Like seeing that is very moving, where it's kind of like I'm very privileged and I take that for granted a lot. So it's kind of like when I see stuff like that, where I'm just like, oh my God, like people don't have it as easy. But for them, like as long as they wake up and they see another day and they have a roof over their shoulders, like that's a win.
I kind of wrote this like just a little like I wrote this on the outline, but I feel like it can go into like just wrapping up kind of what I feel about it. I don't know if you guys have seen, but there's this quote at our school. It's like by the library on this like podium thing. And it says, among truly educated persons, there's no discrimination. And I feel like right when I like watched this movie, I immediately thought of that quote. I like the first day I saw it, I took a picture of that quote because it literally made so much sense to me. But this movie actually makes sense to that